ascendiste a la gloria, oh Cristo nuestro Dios, y alegras a tus discípulos con la promesa del Espíritu Santo.
Well, today is the feast day, the slightly moved feast day of John the Baptist, celebrating his birth, needless to say. There's also another feast day for him celebrating his beheading, his martyrdom. So I thought I would give a little talk today about John the Baptist, certainly in honor of John the Baptist. But what I really want to talk about is where he was doing the baptizing in the River Jordan. And you'll see why. And I have not specially prepared. In other words, I am giving a talk that I give on pilgrimages when I'm at the spot where John the Baptist did his baptizing. And I hope that I will be sufficiently inspired in the moment. But first of all, to cut to the chase, the spot where John the Baptist baptized in the Jordan River wasn't just an ordinary spot in the Jordan River. It is a spot, a very, very specific spot, where two other incredibly important things happened, both of which are very related to the fact that it was where John the Baptist was baptizing in the Jordan River and where John the Baptizer specifically baptized Jesus. What was that spot? Can I see some hands? That spot was the exact same place where the Jews first entered the Promised Land. When they were led by Joshua after their 40 years in the desert, they crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land at the very same spot in the Jordan River. And one way you know this, well, let me pull up a map. Okay, this is actually a satellite photograph map. And the yellow circle is the spot where Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. It's the spot where John the Baptist was hanging out, baptizing all of the Jews who came to him. And it's also the spot where Joshua brought the Jews into the Promised Land for the first time. And then the red circle in the upper left-hand corner, you see it says Tell Jericho. What's that mean? Tell means dig. Jericho is the town of Jericho. It's the dig of Jericho because it's where the 10,000-year-old city, I believe it's the oldest city on earth, actually, that's still in existence. In any case, it's 10,000 years old, and it is where the city of Jericho was. And you know Joshua because Joshua circled the walls of the city of Jericho for 7 times, blew the shofar, and the walls came tumbling down. As a matter of fact, I happen to have a shofar here, if I'm not mistaken. So let me grab my shofar. Whoops. Anyway, that's what Joshua did while they were marching around the city for 7 times, and that he blew down the walls of Jericho. You all know that song and certainly the story. So anyway, let me go back to the picture. Okay, so the third thing that happened there is that is where the prophet Elijah crossed over the Jordan River to the far side, so crossed from the Israel side to what's Jordan now, or if you're looking at this map, crossed from the left side to the right side, from the west to the east, and was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Those 3 things happened in the same spot. Furthermore, I'll move a little bit, see if I can do this moving the map a little bit. Yeah, there. And you can see the yellow circle, or the remains of the yellow circle on the far right-hand side, I believe, of the screen. And you see the old city of Jericho there with the red circle. And on the far left side of the screen, you just see monastery. See where it says monastery? Halfway up from bottom to top and on the far left side of the screen. That monastery is built where Jesus fasted for 40 days in the desert before his public ministry. It's basically overlooking, it's literally overlooking the old city of Jericho, because this is a little bit of a topographical image, and you see the mountains there. You can see that that monastery is essentially on the hillside overlooking Jericho. Ethel, the answer to how Jericho can be 10,000 years old, if according to Jewish calendar the earth is less than 7,000 years old, it's actually less than 6,000 years old. And the answer is, it's a good question. I thought maybe I would get in trouble for not explaining it at the time. That 10,000 years is according to archaeologists. It's not according to the Bible timeline. So archaeologists claim that they can date the city of Jericho to 10,000 years ago. They also claim that they can date the earth to 5 million years ago or 5 billion years ago or whatever they date it to. So anyway, so it's just, that reflects the gulf between the apparent biblical description of time and the apparent scientific measure of time, supposedly. Okay, now, I guess first I'll show some pictures, and then I will talk about why. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about why first. Just think about it. It's incredibly, incredibly cool. Okay? What was Joshua crossing the Jordan River with the nation of Israel after the Exodus from Egypt? What was it? It was the Jews going to the Promised Land and getting into the Promised Land, right? And what was the Exodus from Egypt? I think I gave this talk on the air just a few days ago, if I remember right. But what was the Exodus from Egypt? It was a picture of Christian salvation, right? The Jews were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, a picture of mankind being a slave to the power of Satan. Pharaoh was a picture of Satan. The Jews were released from the power of the Pharaoh first when God raised up a deliverer, Moses, who was a picture of the true Redeemer, Jesus. As a matter of fact, in Judaism, Moses is referred to as the first Redeemer, and the Messiah is referred to as the second Redeemer. The Jews crossed the desert for 40 years. First, after Moses kind of raised them up, they were finally freed from the power of Pharaoh when they crossed the waters of the Red Sea. That was a picture of the Christian passing through the waters of baptism and being freed from the power of Satan. Remember, Pharaoh was a picture of Satan. The Jews wandered through the desert for 40 years on their way to the Promised Land, picture of the Christian wandering through the desert of this life for 40 or 80 years on the way to the true Promised Land, the heavenly Jerusalem, not the earthly Jerusalem. The Jews were fed in the desert for those 40 years by the miraculous bread from heaven, manna, which was a picture of the true miraculous bread from heaven, the Eucharist, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of the second person of the Most Holy Trinity, which feeds the Christian, nourishes the Christian in his journey through the desert of this life to the true Promised Land, which is heaven. And now we get to the fact that the Jews made the transition from the desert to the Promised Land by crossing the Jordan River in exactly the spot where Jesus was baptized. So Joshua, by the way, the name Joshua is the same as the name Jesus. If you say Jesus in Hebrew, you say Joshua, Yeshua. It's Yeshua, basically. The Hebrew name is Yeshua. It means God saves. And Joshua's name in the original was Yeshua. And Jesus' name in the original was Yeshua. Joshua crossed the Jordan River at exactly that spot, bringing the Jews into the Promised Land. And Jesus was baptized in exactly that spot, bringing the Christian into the true promised land, the heavenly Jerusalem, because when he was baptized there, he gave water the power to erase original sin. In other words, you could say that he instantiated, he brought into being the sacrament of baptism, the removal of original sin. So just like Joshua brought the Jews into the promised land there, Jesus brought mankind into the promised land there, opened the way to heaven for them, and chose the exact same spot. Now, the first person who went to heaven, if you take the Bible seriously, was Elijah, because remember, he was taken up to heaven in the fiery chariot. The theological belief in Judaism, and I believe actually in traditional Catholicism, at least by the church fathers, was that Elijah is in heaven with his body, if I'm not mistaken, although he didn't die. So once again, you have that same spot on the surface of the earth being the wormhole between earth and heaven, to borrow a term from science fiction. Now, let's visit the place. You can see why I enjoy taking these pilgrimages to Israel so much. But anyway, okay, so there was the map, and let's see. I think this is going to work. Okay. And there is a photograph. Let me see what you're looking at. Yes. Okay, so this is working. There's a photograph of the spot on the Jordan River that Joshua crossed over. Joshua crossed over. By the way, it was miraculous. He crossed over with the Ark of the Covenant, and the waters stopped flowing. And he crossed over there, and that's where John the Baptist was baptizing. And I have a lot of pictures there. What you're seeing when you see that a rather underdressed man walking down the steps, that's actually the Jordan side of the river. That's not the Israel side of the river. The near side, the photographer was standing on the Israel side of the river. You can also, by the way, see how narrow it is, although it also was not, how can I put it? It was a relatively dry time of the year. And this was our priest. He was a FSSP priest, Father Austin, who was baptizing in the Jordan River in that spot, wearing his cassock and looking like an Eastern Orthodox priest, but he isn't. That's me, actually, standing there. Looks like I have a bug on my head, but it's too late to do anything about it now. Anyway, I'm just flipping through these because I'm not exactly sure what they are. There you see a Orthodox church built on the Jordanian side of the river. Actually, you see two things. You see a dome structure, and then you see a tower. And they have a church there on the top of the little hill there, which commemorates the spot where Elijah, where the Uber from heaven came down and picked up Elijah, the fiery chariot Uber, to take him up to heaven. There I am waiting in the water. And some of you may recognize that lady with the lovely golden tresses as my wife, but there is Father Austin, not rebaptizing, you know that, but just ceremonially doing this little memorial of baptism in the spot. And let's see what we have here. That's again the river with from the Israeli side looking over the Jordanian side. That's the church structure on the Jordanian side commemorating Elijah's ascension. That's the chapel on the spot of Elijah's ascension. Whoops, let's see what we have here. Oh, and that is from a distance. That is the church on the Jordanian side. the Jordanian side, or the spot where Elijah went up to heaven, and you can see. I wondered, could you actually? There's no way for me to tell. You can see how it's kind of on the crest of the hill, and now I'll put myself back up here for a moment. This site in the Jordan River, where all of this wonderful stuff happened, was not accessible to pilgrims until about 10 years ago. There was another spot where pilgrims went to pretend to be at the spot where Jesus was baptized, but it wasn't at all the right spot, and everyone knew it wasn't the right spot. Maybe not all the pilgrims who went there, but it was never thought to be the right spot. The reason why the real spot wasn't accessible is because, in fact, it is a very narrow crossing in between Jordan and Israel. And at the time of the Six-Day War, it was mined. It was mined on the Israeli side to prevent the Jordanian army or terrorists from just crossing the river at that point and invading Israel, attacking Israel. So it was mined, and that was a minefield, and that's what that sign says. It says warning, beyond this point, mines. But they cleared a path. They cleared a channel, a corridor, to enable access to the baptism site. And going back to that original map, it's clear for a lot of reasons that it is actually the spot of John the Baptist's baptism. But one of the reasons is you can see how it's directly across from Jericho. Now, let's see. Let me go back to where I was. Whoops. Now, I had mentioned that you see where it says St. George's Monastery. That was the Mount of Temptation where Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and was tempted by the devil. And I would not dream of going to Jericho without going up to St. George's Monastery. Here you see the monastery built in the hillside above Jericho. The trees are essentially Jericho. And about halfway up the cliff, you see that monastery. Let me see what you're seeing. Yep. And until recently, certainly the first time I was in Israel, actually the first time I was in Israel as a Catholic even, in about the early 90s, you had to hike up that mountain to get to the monastery, to get to the spot where Jesus fasted. And it's really hot there, especially in the summer, really hot. That was quite a grueling hike, like 2 or 3 hours in, bright sun and 115 degrees and no shade. But they built a cable car. They put up a cable car. So now you can just zip up there in the cable car. It's actually a cable car that's designed for ski areas. Swiss made, I believe, German made or Swiss made. So anyway, there's another picture of the hillside above the Mount of Temptation, actually. And you can see the monastery a little bit to the left, which is where Jesus went through the temptation. And here you see, this is just basically what the caves looked like. Remember, Jesus wasn't in the monastery at the time. He was just in a cave. And so this is the raw caves on that hillside. You can see that mountainside is full of little caves, which was what Jesus was in before they built a monastery around it. So here again, you see the monastery halfway up the cliffside. And here again, you see the little holes of what would have been, what it would have looked like when Jesus was in one of those caves. But he actually was in the cave, which is the monastery was built around. Again, the monastery. And this is pretty cool because it's in the monastery. It is the stone on which Jesus was sitting when he was tempted by the devil. And it's in a church part of the monastery, and they enclosed it with glass so that people couldn't take souvenirs or scratch their initials in it or something. But needless to say, it's an incredibly wonderful place to pray. The little room that it's in is maybe, 12 feet by 12 feet, 10 feet by 10 feet. Maybe you could cram, 20 people into it, 25 people into it. But sometimes one's lucky. And I've been there alone, or, alone with the occasional other person trickling through. I don't want to say for hours, that's an exaggeration, but certainly for a half an hour at a time. And that's pretty much it for the travelog. This is one of the monastic cells from the outside, where the monastery is built inside. Part of the monastery is built inside the cliff face, and this would be what it would look like from the outside. So let me bring this back up. So that's the Mount of Temptation. So I'm not going to push the mystical symbolism too strong, because I'm making it up as I go along, so to speak. But you can see, I don't know how to put it. You can see how much of the Jewish salvation history took place here. The Jews entered in the Promised Land. The Jews won the first battle against the old inhabitants of the Promised Land. The Jews exorcised, so to speak, were they Canaanites? I think they were Canaanites. You tell me. That the old inhabitants, and cleared the way for the Promised Land, for the Jewish nation. And you have, and also in that same spot, of course, the Christian salvation history unfolding in a similar way. Jesus opening the gates of heaven, Elijah, in some sense, first entering into heaven, but then Jesus opening up the gates of heaven, reversing original sin. By the way, there's a very cute issue there. Okay, let me see if I can pull this off by the seat of my pants. Remember, when Joshua brought the Jewish nation across that ford in the Jordan River, he was carrying the Ark of the Covenant. Not personally, but his priests were. And as soon as the priest stepped foot on a stone of the Jordan River carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the waters of the Jordan River stopped flowing, and the entire Jewish nation, which I think was 500,000 when they left Egypt and they multiplied in the desert, so who knows how many it was, crossed through dry shod, just like they crossed through the Red Sea dry shod when Moses split the waters. They crossed through the Jordan River there dry shod. And then when the last of the Jews crossed through, the Ark of the Covenant was brought over to the Jewish side, to the Israel side, and the waters flowed again. Now, think about it being the place of Jesus' baptism. The Blessed Virgin Mary is the new Ark of the Covenant, right? The Blessed Virgin Mary was born without original sin. It's like the waters of the Jordan. I mean, you had the river of original sin flowing from Adam until the Blessed Virgin Mary, and preventing mankind from being free of original sin, and therefore preventing mankind from being able to enter heaven. The Blessed Virgin Mary broke that stream of original sin, right? Because she was without original sin. And when she broke that stream of original sin, she was able to give her flesh and blood to be the flesh and blood of the God-man, Jesus, and have our redemption take place. And baptism breaks this stream of original sin, and the Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant, the new Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark of the New Covenant, or both. And the Ark of the Covenant broke the water flow down the Jordan River and allowed the Jews to enter. So there's something there. I'm not hitting the nail on the head, but there's something there with, let's see how I can say this, a parallel there between Mary being the Ark of the New Covenant and stopping the flow of original sin, and the Ark of the Old Covenant stopping the flow of the Jordan River in the place where Jesus was baptized, introducing baptism, which stops the flow of original sin. As much as I can do it. Anyway, super neat. I think it's really neat. And then of course you have the Jews purged in some sense, pushed away the threat of the power of the previous inhabitants, let's say, the native inhabitants, when they conquered Jericho, and Jesus pushed away the power of Satan when he overcame the 3 temptations on the Mount of Temptations, and thereby gave man the power to resist the temptation of Satan through Jesus's victory. And that's 100% kosher Catholic theology. So you have a parallel there also between conquering Jericho and conquering temptation. Excuse me. So there you have it. That's my little homage to John the Baptist today. Oh, wait, I have a picture. I don't think I found, this picture I have to put up. So you're going to have to bear with me. Okay, because this is a real high point for me on my pilgrimages when I can arrange to do it. Okay, what is this? Okay, get this, okay? We go up the Mount of Temptation on our pilgrimages. And the last, by the way, I don't know what to say, but the last couple of 100 yards up, you have to walk. I mean, the cable car brings you up pretty close. As a matter of fact, you can see in this picture, the cable car brings you up to where this restaurant is. And then you see in the distance, it's kind of pretty close to the center of the screen. I'll zoom in, and that might make it a little bit easier to tell what I'm talking about. Let me kind of zoom in. Don't get car sick here. And there. So dead center, you kind of see where the monastery is, the level it's at. So you have to climb that. You're not actually seeing the monastery itself, are you? Because you don't see the buildings. But anyway, you have to climb up a couple 100 yards on steps. It's a staircase, you know, one of these outdoor staircases. Maybe, I don't know, 200 steps, 300 steps. And it's hot. So you're pretty hot and tired by the time you get up to the monastery. And you're in the monastery and you're like kneeling in prayer in front of the spot where Jesus, you know, in the cell essentially, where Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights without eating or drinking. And you're praying, and we have wonderful, you know, we're there praying for an hour and a half or something. And we're also hot and sweaty and tired and thirsty and praying in the spot where Jesus fasted. And then we go back down to this restaurant and have a wonderful lunch, still overlooking the valley, still on top of the Mount of Temptation. And it is so celebratory in a sense. I can't describe it, but it's just a wonderful, ironic luxury to be sitting there feasting, you know, having, I don't think they actually have beer there. I think it's because they're scared of the alcohol or something, but, you know, feasting with, you know, lemonade and soda and wonderful food and everything, on this, pretty much on the spot where Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. So anyway, so whenever possible, you know, we try to arrange, there you see I don't think they had beer. I think I was pretty pretty disappointed in that. But anyway, I guess it's not a big deal compared to what Jesus, Jesus is fast. So anyway, so I'll put myself back up there, and okay, so that's the little travelog. I thought it was in the desert, not in a cave. Did that not look like desert, Antonia? Are you giving me a hard time? I'll put that up again. It takes a little chutzpah, if you ask me, to suggest. Let me find a good representative picture. Okay, there's a good representative picture. You don't call that desert? You don't call that desert? You don't call that desert. I call that desert. Believe me, it's desert. So if he had a cave in the desert, he had a cave in the desert. Okay. So that's that. So that's that. I'll make that a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more deserty. Okay, there. Okay, so that's I kind of want to do that because again, it's tying together. It's not a coincidence. Israel isn't just another place that Jesus decided to be born in or whatever. Jewish salvation history is Catholic salvation history. Jewish salvation history is the first half and the prefigurement of Christian salvation history. There are two phases of the same plan for salvation, the same economy of salvation, the same system of salvation. There are two phases. The Jewish phase was preparatory, and the Christian phase was fulfilled, was effective. But the Jewish phase was also a prefigurement, and the Christian phase was the reality. So here you see Judaism as prefiguring Christian salvation in the story of Judaism, in the very same places where the fulfillment of it happened in Christianity. Okay. So here I am again. I worked up a thirst. I think I have to have some iced coffee. Oh, Antonia, I will answer this actually. The Hebrew word, I got news for you. The Hebrew word for desert, if I remembered correctly, is midaber or midabar. I think midaber, which is the word for wilderness. There are no two Hebrew words. There isn't a Hebrew word for wilderness and a Hebrew word for desert. It's one and the same word. Now, in Israel, most of the wilderness is desert. They don't have many forests. The wilderness is desert. So, it's not so bad that they only have one word for wilderness and desert. But of course, we have two words for wilderness and desert. So when the Bible gets translated, midaber or midabar, sometimes gets translated as desert and sometimes as wilderness. But whenever you see wilderness, it might be desert, and whenever you see desert, it might be wilderness. No, Jesus fasted from food and water. It says so in the New Testament. Food and drink. Yeah. Look it up. So, there. I hate saying goodbye, but it's time to say goodbye. And happy St. John the Baptist feast day.